The new King Charles has visited every nation in the UK since his accession to the throne. Here he is speaking in both English and Welsh to the Senedd.
Through all the years of her reign, the land of Wales could not have been closer to my mother's heart. Roedd lle arbennig I Gymru yn uchelon. I know she took immense pride in your many great achievements, even as she also felt with you deeply in time of sorrow.
The time of sorrow was presumably a reference to the 1966 Aberfan disaster when 116 children and 28 adults were killed when a school was crushed by a landslide of coal waste from a nearby colliery. The Queen visited in the aftermath and numerous times over the following decades. The visit by King Charles, though, didn't come without protest. Boos could be heard as he arrived at Cardiff Castle. That probably wasn't the sound he was hoping to hear. Yet First Minister Mark Drakeford was clear he didn't think the booers represented the majority of opinion in Wales. On Good Morning Britain, he gave this answer about how he's responding to the pageantry surrounding the Queen's death, given he's an avowed Republican.
It's very important for me to say that the job I do, and I do it today and I do it every day, is to do my best to reflect the views and preferences of the people of Wales. That's the job of the First Minister. I do have my own views. I've had them for 60 years on this topic, but I set those views aside because that's not my focus today. The bulk of opinion here in Wales will want to demonstrate a huge sense of respect and indeed affection for the late Queen Elizabeth. And that's where our thoughts and our focus will be during what is a very important day for Wales.
Drakeford did, however, say there should be a live debate over the appropriateness of the title Prince of Wales. Some Welsh people think they should get a say over who becomes their prince, or think whoever does should at least be Welsh. Moving on to Scotland, given the Queen died in Balmoral, many of the first ceremonial moments following her death were held there. And like in Wales, Prince Charles was met with some boos.
God save the King!
If you hadn't heard those boos before, it might be because in a later edit, they didn't make the cut.
There was a 21-gun salute fired from Edinburgh Castle after that.
God save the King!
They decided the sound effects from the crowd were no longer required for the audience to understand what was going on. In any case, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has been clear. Scotland was loyal to the Queen, and they will be loyal to the new King.
Our nation is in mourning today for a Queen whose loss we have not yet begun to come to terms with. We are deeply honoured by the presence today of His Majesty King Charles III and the Queen Consort. Your Majesty, we stand ready to support you as you continue your own life of service and as you build on the extraordinary legacy of your beloved mother, our Queen. Queen Elizabeth, Queen of Scots, we are grateful for her life. May she now rest in peace.
Without doubt, though, the most interesting visit Charles has made since his accession to the throne was to Northern Ireland. That's because the current largest party in Northern Ireland is Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin are historically associated with the IRA, and in 1979, the IRA assassinated Charles's great-uncle and father figure, Lord Mountbatten. There have, of course, already been a number of meetings between the royals and Sinn Féin since then, but the coziness of this interaction between Michelle O'Neill, who's Sinn Féin's leader in the north, and the new king was still striking.
You're very kind. Thank you so much for the incredibly kind things that you said about my mother.
Well, she played a great role here in terms of reconciliation and building our peace, so it's the end of an era for sure.
And now, to say the least.
Yes.
And what you say, Sam, is you would never read your obituaries and all the nice things people say.
I know.
Always very frustrating.
I know. We don't say enough about people whenever they're alive.
No,
For sure.
I know.
For sure.
Anyway, it's very good to see you again. I haven't seen you
Nice
for
to see
a
you.
bit.
Yes, I know. A few years. Cork, I think, was the last time we met.
But you're now the biggest party, are you?
We are indeed. We are indeed. Yes.
All this skill and ingenuity.
That joke at the end between Charles Michel O'Neill and the Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly appeared to be at the expense of the DUP's Geoffrey Donaldson, who was standing right there. Now, Aaron, I think that last video is pretty incredible. Obviously, the DUP, normally the party you'd associate with the monarchy, and it seems like they were sort of getting the mick taken out of them. But in general terms as well, what have we learned over the past few days since the death of the Queen about the relationship between the four nations and the royals?
Well, I thought the interaction between Charles and the various Northern Irish politicians, it wasn't just Michel O'Neill, was interesting. And there is that adage, of course, in conservative sort of politics, which is reforms that you may preserve. That's why we still have a monarchy in this country, a constitutional monarchy, because they have allowed certain changes over the last sort of 250 years. Expansion of the vote and so on and so forth. And it is important to say, I tried to say this on Twitter, but you get cancelled. People are so passionate. But it is important to say in 2014, there was a referendum around Scottish independence and the campaign for independence lost. But if you're a democratic politician like Nicola Sturgeon and you have the possibility of repeating that, there are very few incentives to go around slagging off the head of state. Also very important to say that even had they won independence in 2014, it was never on the agenda for Scotland to become a republic. They would still recognise Elizabeth II at that time as the head of state. Even now, I presume the plan is to recognise Charles III as the head of state. There would still be, I can't remember the terminology, goes back to James I, the crown of two nations or whatever the hell it is. Frankly, I don't care. But the point is that Scottish independence and republicanism are two separated issues. They've been quite expertly separated by the SNP as a successful political party over the last 15 years. Wales, a bit different because you do have, of course, to one extent, the element of language that's historically been associated with rising Welsh nationalism. But increasingly, the polls indicate that actually there is rising support for Welsh independence among Labour voters in the south of the country who don't necessarily speak Welsh. So again, a different set of challenges. It may be that actually the nationalism they pursue is a bit more like the civic nationalism that you see with the SNP. I think the success of Welsh nationalism and its independence movement will rest upon the possibility of fusing those two elements. And then Ireland, again, a bit like with the referendum argument for Scotland, their big target, the Sinn Féin, both in the north and south of the island, is to have a border referendum around unification and the relationship between the north and the south. That's their big ambition. And so far, they're doing really well. I have to say, Michael, that Sinn Féin, both in the north and the south, to me, look like the most serious, committed, politically astute party in the British Isles, right, which includes both the Republic and the North of Ireland. I think they're probably followed by the SNP and then thereafter Welsh Labour. And I think that does provoke some pretty interesting questions. What makes Westminster so dysfunctional that the two parties there are incompetent, inept, and they don't even look or sound credible? And yet parties historically at the fringes, the outside, in both Scotland and Ireland, they look so much more professional. And I'd rather trust those people running the country than Liz Truss or even Keir Starmer. I think that says something about how broken British politics and British institutions are.
It probably has a lot to do with the fact that they're not stuffed with careerists. I mean, I assume, now the SNP have been dominant for a very long time. So I imagine now if you do want to get successful in Scottish politics, then the SNP is the party that you join. But that wasn't the case for a long time, and it certainly wasn't the case when it comes to Sinn Féin. So I think presumably you've got a lot of people who've joined that party because they're very dedicated to a cause. They're people who care about something, but they have been around for such a long time and they have been, subject to state repression or subject to attacks. They've sort of learned along the way, and now they are very, very professional. You know, it's a bit like sort of if the Corbyn movement hadn't just been thrown straight to the top of the Labour Party, but actually had about 20 years to sort of grow and learn how to withstand these attacks and to professionalise, you would have had a movement that's full of people who actually care about something. They're not just careerists, and also they would have had the practice that they know how to navigate the attacks that you're going to get from the centralised British state. And I suppose you potentially got the sweet spot when it comes to the SNP and Sinn Féin, that they're not yet dominated by careerists, but they have been around for long enough that they know how to comport themselves and you know, not fall subject to the traps like probably we did on the left of the Labour Party.
I think that's true, but I also do think there's something about Westminster and London which is deeply corrosive and corrupt. Personally, I think even if the Labour left had done what you're saying over 25, 30 years, I think that intimate relationship between the archaic institutions of the British state, power, you've got so much money in London, you've got the media there, and basically you can live in zones 1 and 2 and you can think, fuck the rest of the country, screw the people I'm meant to represent. Is that the same thing in Holyrood? Is that the same thing with the Northern Irish Assembly? Is that the same thing with the Senedd? I don't know. You know, I'm not a scholar. I'm not I'm not obsessed with these institutions, but I am familiar with Westminster, and it does seem to me set up to produce bad politicians, bad politics, bad policy. So I think there's lessons there for us. And I think, like you say, I think patronage and how it works in Westminster, it's almost like the intention is to produce bad outcomes. I'm sure people have complaints about Holyrood or the Senedd or the North of Ireland. But I think you're right as well about the culture of outsider parties and the sweet spot which the SNP and Sinn Féin presently find themselves. I think it's probably a bit of both, right? And you do hear those arguments with regards to the SNP. Obviously, now they've got so much to protect. People have built empires. They have built careers. So that makes you a little bit more small C conservative with regards to strategic adventurism and a second referendum. Because if they lose that, Michael, they're not going to get another shot in a really long time. Sinn Féin, to me, just seem like a class apart. Everything I see from Sinn Féin, the media, the leaders, the policy proposals, even their youth activists, top notch. And I think when you see the sort of next wave of elections, particularly in the South, I think you'll see potentially a Sinn Féin government, who knows, long way away. And the reaction that will elicit from the London media will be really something to behold.